In a therapist's office, teenage boy Max confides that he longs to be just like everyone else, but he believes it's an unattainable dream. The reason behind his face being completely concealed by bandages is rather extraordinary. Max was born with a face of astonishing beauty that has the peculiar effect of causing instant death to anyone who gazes upon it. Surprisingly, those who meet this fate seem to do so with happiness. Having beheld his lovely visage, Max recounts the story of his birth, revealing that he inadvertently caused the demise of the nurses and the doctor who attended to him due to his enchanting appearance. Fortunately, his parents are immune to the deadly allure of his face. Medical examinations conducted that day disclosed that his beauty triggers a hormonal surge that swiftly terminates a person's life. Consequently, his family had to relocate to a small town and take every possible precaution, including homeschooling Max, to safeguard him and others from harm. Regrettably, this isolation led Max to grow up lonely and extremely sheltered, making him awkward in social interactions. His unusual hobby is embroidery. The psychologist, skeptical of this incredible tale, compels Max to uncover his face. Suddenly, Max's parents hear a peculiar sound emanating from the psychologist's office. Rushing inside, they discover Max hastily rewrapping his face, and the psychologist lies lifeless on the floor. The police arrive, warning Max's parents that these incidents can no longer be dismissed as accidents, urging Max to exercise greater caution or face the possibility of imprisonment. As the adults converse, Max notices a brick and decides to take it home. Later at his residence, Max's parents express their disapproval of his constant confinement and enlist his only friend Dan to sign him up for a dating app, much to Max's irritation. Alone in his room, Max implores Dan to strike him with the brick to rid himself of his deadly beauty. However, Dan becomes engrossed in his phone and the notifications from his dating apps. Frustrated, Max throws the phone to the ground, causing Dan to strike him as he had desired. This lands Max in the hospital with his mother. In the waiting room, his mother reads in a magazine that families are being sought to host exchange students, possibly offering Max the chance to have a friend at home. Max vehemently opposes the idea and searches for another magazine, only to find the rack empty. A girl named Alex possesses the last magazine and graciously shares it with him, leading the two teenagers to engage in conversation until Max is called by the doctor. Later on, Dan decides to lift Max's spirits by setting him up on a blind date. They meet the girl at a restaurant, and Dan tries to break the ice with some small talk. However, things take an awkward turn as soon as Dan leaves. The girl seems cautious about Max's appearance, so Max tries to appear friendlier by gifting her a handkerchief embroidered with her name. Things seem to be improving, but suddenly, they're interrupted by commotion caused by a guy named Craig at the restaurant. Craig approaches their table with the intention of flirting with the girl, but when he notices Max's bandages, he realizes Max is the guy from some infamous stories. Craig behaves rudely and intimidates Max, who tries to leave to avoid trouble but accidentally knocks over their drinks in the process. Craig adds insult to injury by throwing the handkerchief into the spilled drinks and pressuring Max to reveal his face, even pushing him against the table. Thankfully, the restaurant staff seizes the opportunity to kick Craig out. Max then asks the girl for another date, but she's now frightened by his appearance and declines. After such a disastrous date, Max despairs and heads to the nearest bridge, contemplating ending it all. Unexpectedly, Alex appears and teases him for his actions, sparking a conversation about his life, candy, and Max's dream of swimming in a pool of jelly beans. In an attempt to distract him, Alex invites Max to join her, and they take a bus to a retirement home where they meet Rosemary and Esther, two spirited elderly ladies with terminal conditions. The four of them spend a delightful afternoon together, sharing tea and snacks. During their time together, they discover that Esther is trying to write one more book before her Alzheimer's makes it impossible. After leaving the retirement home, Alex walks Max home, and Max wonders if they can meet again, but Alex declines. Sometime later, Max hangs out with Dan, who encourages him not to give up. Since Max can't find Alex on social media due to not knowing her last name, Dan suggests he frequent the places he's seen her before in the hope of running into her. That night, Max creates an embroidery design inspired by the moment at the bridge. The next morning, Max makes his way back to the bus stop and realizes that Alex intentionally missed her ride. At first, Alex is a bit cautious around Max, but she eventually agrees to spend time together. They head to the store, buy heaps of jelly beans, and fill Max's bathroom tub, finally fulfilling his dream. Inspired by this, Alex confesses her desire to swim in a river of jello. While enjoying their candy bath, Max finally opens up about his facial condition, but Alex had already suspected he was the person from those infamous stories. In return, Alex reveals that she has a rare cardiovascular disease that makes her allergic to endorphins. Excitement causes inflammation, leading to her heart growing larger. She shows Max the monitor under her jacket, which constantly tracks her heart size, and explains that her body rejects emotions. Currently, she's on an experimental medication to manage it. Hearing all of this, Max feels like he's finally found someone who truly understands his situation. Afterward, they go to watch a movie and end up getting a bit tipsy, laughing at every little detail. Then, they head back to Max's home, where Alex admires his embroidery, prompting her to ask him to create a design of her someday. In a spontaneous moment, Alex moves closer to Max and takes off his sunglasses, which briefly startles him. Thankfully, his eyes alone can't harm people, and the two teenagers share a sweet moment that seems like it might lead to a kiss. Unfortunately, Max's parents arrive at that exact moment, disrupting the moment. Although the teens quickly separate, Max's parents can sense what's going on and are in shock. Max's mother is overjoyed that Max has finally met a girl and warmly embraces Alex. Additionally, the parents introduce them to Yushen, an exchange student who will be living with them from now on, and she's brought her cat along. However, Yushen is quite reserved and mostly keeps to herself, even ordering her own food and eating alone during dinner. From that point on, Max and Alex become inseparable, often visiting the retirement home to enjoy tea and games with Rosemary and Esther. One day, they decide to embark on a camping trip, leading to a disagreement with Max's parents, who insist on Yushen joining them. The next day, the group heading into the forest includes Max, Alex, Yushen, Dan, and Dan's latest date. Yushen continues to keep her distance, but the others have a blast exploring and taking photos. When Alex accidentally injures her hand with a branch, Max uses a piece of his face bandages to wrap her wound, causing Alex's heart to race a bit faster. Later in the evening, they set up camp, and Dan and his date find a bit of privacy under a blanket while Yushen sleeps. Inspired by Dan's actions, Max also covers himself and Alex with a blanket and plans a surprise. He asks her to close her eyes and then places a bandage over them, encouraging her to feel his face to get an idea of what he looks like. Max makes a shocking confession, revealing that he was responsible for the death of the girl who gave him his first kiss. He explains that she broke a certain rule by opening her eyes, and he shares this dark secret with Alex. In a gesture of comfort and understanding, Alex kisses him before leaving the blanket they were under. Some days later, Alex calls Max to inform him that they can't meet up because she needs to help her mother with household chores. Meanwhile, Max's mother asks him to dispose of their old Christmas tree, so he enlists the assistance of Dan. While they are outside, Yushen is smoking, and when she tosses her cigarette, it accidentally sets the tree ablaze. Dan and Max rush to extinguish the fire, but Dan ends up burning his hands in the process. They rush him to the hospital for treatment. Once Dan's hands are taken care of, they attempt to leave the hospital but unexpectedly run into Alex and her mother. It turns out Alex had lied about being busy and had been at the hospital all along. The boys attempt to introduce themselves, but Alex tells her mother that they are just co-workers from the retirement home, and they leave without further conversation. The following day, Max goes shopping with his dad and ponders how to determine if he's in love. His dad encourages him to be direct with Alex about his feelings, as they may not be apparent to her. In the afternoon, Max and Alex hang out again, and Alex reveals that she lied the previous day because her mother disapproves of her having friends, fearing that too much excitement might harm her. Her mother only approves of her visits to the retirement home because it's a calm and uneventful place. Afterward, they visit the retirement home and receive distressing news that Rosemary is in critical condition. They visit her room and discover that she is being kept alive by machines, which deeply disturbs Alex as she believes people should have the right to die with dignity. She asks Max to show his face to Rosemary so she can find peace, but Max initially refuses. This leads Alex to leave the room on her own. However, after contemplating Rosemary's suffering, Max has a change of heart and returns to the room. He begins removing his bandages, and Rosemary understands his intention, allowing him to continue. Rosemary passes away with a gentle smile on her face. Following this incident, Alex stops responding to Max's messages, leaving him confused and worried. His parents offer advice, but it results in an argument, prompting Max to seek solace with Dan. Dan shares exciting news about a party at the local school and encourages Max to attend despite being homeschooled. Max, overwhelmed by nervousness, lets Dan take his phone and send Alex an invitation to the dance. When he doesn't receive a response, Max goes to Alex's house to confront her about ignoring him. Alex eventually reveals that the experimental medication for her condition isn't working, and her heart continues to grow larger. They argue about her pushing him away, but Max remains supportive. Finally, Alex agrees to go to the dance with him. On the day of the party, Alex surprises Max with humorous costumes from an adult store. She's dressed as a maid, and she got Max a dog mask and horn, turning him into a horn dog. At the school, they have a great time dancing and flirting together. Initially, the music is fast-paced and catchy, but it shifts to a slow, romantic tune that draws them closer. This intense moment causes Alex's heart to dangerously accelerate, leading to a nosebleed, and she rushes out to tend to it. As Max waits, he spends time with Dan and his date, but their moment is abruptly interrupted by Craig. Craig is envious of Dan dating his ex and seeks revenge for the restaurant incident. He seizes the opportunity to grab Max and forcibly removes his mask, resulting in the immediate death of Dan's date. Chaos ensues, with people panicking as the police arrive to arrest Max, placing a bag over his head. On his way out, Max notices Alex being taken away in an ambulance. That night, Max finds himself in a cell. The following morning, he is released and rushes to the hospital, where Alex's mom embraces him, sharing in their grief. Max then visits Alex and learns the painful truth: she had been downplaying her illness the entire time. In reality, she has a terminal condition and has known since childhood that she would not live past this age. Alex, who despises being connected to machines at the hospital, asks Max to reveal his face to her. Max initially refuses, unable to bear witnessing her passing, and snaps, explaining how the constant experience of death has taken a toll on him. He leaves, unable to listen to her any longer. Overwhelmed by grief, Max attempts to undergo plastic surgery using a brick but is stopped by his parents. In the process, he accidentally kills Yushin's cat. In the ensuing days, Max ignores all of Alex's messages. Sometime later, Max joins Dan in paying respects to the deceased girl. Despite his own grief, Dan scolds Max for ignoring Alex, making him realize that he may miss the opportunity to say goodbye. The next day, Max visits Alex at the hospital and covers the wall with his embroidery as an apology. He also shows her the design he made of her. With Alex's condition deteriorating, Max lies down beside her, removes his bandages, and they share a kiss, bracing themselves for the worst. When Max opens his eyes, he's shocked to find that Alex is still alive. However, the overwhelming happiness of finally seeing the real Max proves too much for her heart, and she passes away, wearing a smile as she recalls the time spent with him. Later, Max attends Alex's funeral, utterly devastated by the loss of the only girl who ever cared for him. Afterward, he goes to the bridge, carrying an envelope with Alex's name on it. Inside, he places Jell-O powder and tosses it into the river to fulfill Alex's dream. Following Alex's death, Max returns to therapy and begins to honor the lessons she taught him. He continues to visit the retirement home to keep Esther company, and the police clear him and Craig of all charges, as the girl's death is seen as a natural cause. This case becomes famous, and Max starts receiving numerous letters from terminally ill individuals seeking his help. Max begins to understand that sometimes, death can be a necessary release, and he visits those who reach out to him to help them find peace in a painless passing. Max also discovers that Alex didn't die because true love granted her immunity, which is also the reason why his parents never died either. With Dan being Max's one true friend, Max can hang out with him without wearing the bandages. However, he must be cautious, as one day he forgets to cover his face, opens the door, and accidentally kills Craig, who had come for a visit.